Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are here today to talk about unifying structured and unstructured data. Could I get a show of hands? How many of you are existing QuickSight users? Okay, that's quite a few. How about Q Business? Who's familiar with it? Who's using it? Okay, all right. So today, in this session, we're going to be talking about how we're bringing both of these worlds together. The world of unstructured and structured together, and how these two worlds collide, and being able to provide insights and value to your users, so that way they're able to gain the best value. My name is Rahul Ishwar. I'm a Senior Product Manager with QuickSight. Today I'm joined by Jean-Pierre, who is a Principal Product Manager with Q Business. And then we have a couple of customers as well. We have Ravi from Whole Foods, and we have Noah from Kepler. We're going to be hearing from them a little bit later about how they're using these services and these features, some of the use cases, and kind of the value that they're able to extract from this integration. So let's start with kind of understanding, at reInvent this week, I'm sure you've heard about Gen AI, right? That shouldn't be more of a surprise. Everything's about AI these days. But what is interesting though is AI is helping increase productivity for the end users. We're leveraging AI to make people's lives better and easier, simplifying processes that it would otherwise take minutes, hours, days to do, trying to bring all that back together. And that's how we're trying to use AI. But if we were to take a step back and we all ask this question, do we all have all the insights always available, right? Probably not. And the reason is, very similar to like this visual here, we have a very myopic and centric view. And what we end up doing as a result is we miss the bigger picture. We don't see everything that is interconnected. We're not able to connect the dots, and we kind of miss that. And that's what our users are doing as well. You have a very centric view. I know my data. I know that I have my structured information in one corner. I have my unstructured information. I have emails. I have PDF files or Word documents. And you got this wall right in between. And these two worlds do not mesh well with each other. And this is further complicated, right? When you even think about these unstructured scenarios, just imagine you're trying to look for that one nugget of information that existed somewhere that you recall, that I had that email, I know that Salesforce entry is there, I know that customer talked about it, I know that user needs that information. Just trying to search for that is just a time-consuming and a laborious process. This is, as an example, we can look at S3. S3 has exabytes of data stored, but that's not the interesting part. It's the amount of times that it's also being accessed, right? So we have a two-sided problem here. We have a lot of information, and it's being accessed quite a bit. But it's not just the structured information that is being accessed, it's also the unstructured information. And there's even more of that, right? And the problem we have is very similar to this unconstructed bridge. The two worlds are not connected. You're not able to meet that. And you are now faced with users that are frustrated. They end up having to log into two different applications. You may miss insights that would otherwise be valuable. You're not able to kind of connect the dots. Why are my sales going lower? Why are my sales increasing? Oh, it's because of this event or this thing that somebody wrote about somewhere, and I'm not able to kind of connect those. And what ends up happening is that you end up spending an inordinate amount of time trying to do that. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve here? We're trying to bring together the worlds of structured and unstructured data. And for those that kind of listened to Matt's keynote on Tuesday, We are happy to announce the GA of being able to bring together these two services. We're able to take QuickSight, which is our answer to structured information, and Amazon Q Business, which is our unstructured answers, and being able to bring those two worlds together. It is a bi-directional connection, and we'll be kind of talking about that in a little bit more detail. And I know we had a lot of hands raised for people that already knew or using QuickSight and Q Business, but for those who are not as familiar, let's dive into these services in a little bit more detail before we talk about how these two integrations are happening. So taking Amazon QuickSight first. Amazon QuickSight is a cloud-first business intelligence product. It's about 7 years old. We started off by building a dashboard capabilities. A couple years ago, we enhanced that further with the ability to generate and create pixel-perfect reports. We've had the ability, as a result of being a cloud-first service and a product, we're able to scale with your customer needs and with your needs as well. So the more users that come on board, you're able to do that as well. It has an in-memory engine called Spice, which allows for the ingestion of data and be able to consume. There's a myriad of connectors that you're able to do for structured content like Redshift and Athena, and you're able to ingest that either to Spice or make a direct connection for more real-time use cases. You're able to take this information and you're able to, as an author, be able to create in a unified fashion, in an analysis, a dashboard as well as a report together. As a user as well, you're also now able to consume both the dashboard and a report together as well. Our pricing model allows for the ability to cater to small businesses to large enterprises. It allows for the pay-as-you-go model, and we have a 30-day free trial for those who are not yet started. We also are kind of underlying structure for data and governance and security. You're able to apply row level and column level security, so you're able to restrict the data relevant to the information that a user should see. We also have an Amazon Q and QuickSight component, which allows for the natural language capabilities. And we utilize this in multiple different ways throughout the product. So it's a little bit more integrated in a more seamless fashion. First, as an author, you're able to use natural language to create visuals. So you're able to kind of ask, hey, I want to be able to create a pie chart with these characteristics, with these dimensions, and Q and QuickSight will be able to generate that for you, so you can apply that directly to your canvas and then to your dashboard and report. As a reader, you're able to ask questions in natural language. And via the Q&A capability, you're able to get responses, not just a single visual, but multiple visuals to provide that comprehensive view. It summarizes that information, and we'll touch upon this a little bit further. We also have the capability, as a user, to be able to create data stories. So how often do we need to create a weekly report or a monthly report, and we keep doing this? Or we need to write documents for our leadership to explain certain trends or certain questions that they may have. Now, using data stories, you're able to ask questions in natural language, be able to select specific visuals, and be able to utilize this to be able to generate beautiful looking visuals, PowerPoint decks, and its data story that you can then share with other QuickSight users. You're also able to summarize in an executive summary what is in that dashboard. So you don't have to go through all the sheets, you can kind of quickly read a quick paragraph to kind of glean what are the key takeaways from that particular dashboard. And the nice part about all this is that it's all embeddable, right? So whether it's been your application, you're able to take that Q&A search bar and embed that directly in there. So that way you're able to enhance the capabilities for your own application, for your users, and provide a very seamless experience. So now I'll turn it over to Jean-Pierre to talk about the Q business.
Thank you, Rahul. Hello, everybody. All right, so we're going to look at the overview for Amazon Q Business. And Amazon Q Business is a GenAI-powered conversational assistant that can answer questions, it can provide summaries, it can generate content, and it can also execute tasks on behalf of the end user based on your enterprise content. So more specifically about the key capabilities, a very common use case and usage of Q Business is for content and insight discovery of your enterprise content. So we offer more than 40 connectors to unstructured data sources like SharePoint, Salesforce, ServiceNow, etc. So you could easily aggregate that content and offer a unique and single interface for your end users to get answers from that content. But because we can tap into that knowledge, end users can also analyze the content and ask a question like, what's the difference between Q Business and QuickSight? And Q Business will be able to analyze the content and give the key features for each product or service, and also highlight the use cases for each. Q Business can also be used to create content. So people in marketing, for example, who need to create a product description page for a new service or product being launched, can, or if you're trying to summarize a long document, Q Business can actually assist you in accelerating those generative tasks. Q Business can also be used to execute actions on behalf of the end user against third-party systems like Salesforce. For example, reading tickets or cases from Salesforce or from Jira, creating or deleting, etc. There's over 50 actions that are supported today in Q Business to be able to extend the capabilities in these productivity tasks that users can do directly from their Q Business applications. So the core value proposition in Q Business is we want to find the accurate answer that is also referenceable for the end user. In this case, on the right-hand side, you can see a screenshot of a conversation ongoing right now where the user is asking, tell me more about availability zones. And we can see an answer in narrative form being presented there with some citations and a sources button that will show an example in a demo shortly what that is for. But the idea here is that we want to make sure that the end user gets trusted answers that are generated from your enterprise data that also have source references for fact checking. So those sources are telling you basically where are the chunks of documents that were pulled to generate this answer. We also provide a conversational experience so that you can have a conversation and keeping context of the previous answers and questions so that you can have a natural experience as if you were talking to a real expert. You also have the availability to access your previous conversations, the conversation history. So if you want to go back to a conversation you had yesterday, we provide a conversation history as well there. And Q Business offers also the ability for customers to influence how Q Business interprets the different data sources that are connected to it. Maybe your SharePoint is more authoritative than your wikis. So we have some very simple sliders and ways to tell Q Business, hey, this is a more important repository than this other one, and that way it can reflect this particular business input into the answers. From a safety and security perspectives, I mentioned we had over 40 connectors to unstructured data sources like Google Drive, SharePoint, Conflict, etc. We not only extract the answers from those sources, but we also pull the access control information, permissions from those documents, so that at prompt time, when the end user is interacting with the application and they ask a question, we know who that user is because we've authenticated that person when they logged into the application. And we then, when we pull and retrieve the information from those indexed sources, we can cross-reference the group membership with those access control lists that are coming back from the retrieved content so that they only see answers from content they are allowed to see. That's a very important aspect. All right, so now having covered an overview for these two services, we're going to dive deeper into the actual user experience of this unification. So I'm going to hand it over back to Rahul to go over the QuickSight side.
Thanks, Jamie. So when we think about from QuickSight to Q Business and how would we integrate that, let's take a walk through what the features are and what capabilities are enhanced as a result of these recent launches this week. So first, If you recall, when we talked about our Q&A capability for readers, they're able to ask questions in natural language. And we provide that multi-visual response that comes back. But now, as a result of the Q business integration, we're also able to surface key insights that are relevant to the question that the user is asking, and be able to tie that back to unstructured information, unstructured data, as in this example, to documents or PDF files or email, etc., and be able to tie all that information together. We're also able to enhance our data stories capability as well. So now as a user, not only are you able to select specific visuals from dashboards, but you're also able to enhance that with files that you may have authored local to your own repository, be able to use that in addition to visuals that are generated from dashboards, and still utilize that Q business connection as well. So now you have three distinct sources of information, all collated together to create a more rich data story. So let's take a look at these features in action. We're going to take a pass through the user experience for the Q&A capability first. We'll go through the data stories, and then we'll talk about the admin setup and how all this happens. So if we take a look at the Q&A experience, this is my QuickSight dashboard, QuickSight console. I'm able to navigate to my favorites where I have already favorited an analysis where I built my dashboard and a dashboard itself. I've utilized a sales pipeline information. And as you can see, I have rich KPIs, I have some visuals, and I have a Sankey chart, and then I have here an opportunities by industry. So let's say now I have a question about what sort of industries there are and what sort of deals are associated with this. So I can open up this Q&A bar on the top. I'm able to utilize natural language to ask the question. And in a few short seconds, you can see that QuickSight will be able to generate visuals on the fly. So these aren't visuals that an author has built. This is using natural LLMs to build visuals on the fly. In addition to summarizing the information in the top, it also has and pulled relevant passages and insights from a variety of different sources that it has cited, as well as it's provided in the bottom. We can take this a little bit further. So now let's say I want to be able to forecast what will my deals look like by month. So now if I type that question again, now Q and QuickSight is now taking that information, existing information, and then forecasting that forward. But the nice part now is that I'm also able to augment this information with documents that maybe my sales go-to-market teams have authored and be able to tie all that together, thereby making sense of what do these forecasts actually mean, is there any relevance, maybe are there some external factors that I should be thinking about as a user. This would have otherwise required me to go log in somewhere else, go search through other documents, or maybe I would have missed this valuable insight that now is right at my fingertips. So now again, let's take a step back. We're going to go back to our QuickSight console. From you can, instead of going back to my dashboard, I'm going to go to my data story. I'm going to type in a prompt on what does my sales pipeline look like, and suggest actions that I can take to improve my sales. You can see I'm able to select specific visuals, again, from my dashboard, or dashboards in this case. I'm able to take an internal memo that I had on my local repository, and then I'm also able to augment all of this with Q business information. As a result of doing so, I'm able to create a very rich and relevant data story that takes all that information, relevant passages and content, and I'm able to create a comprehensive overview of all this. I'm able to take paragraphs, create them as PowerPoint bullet points, and be able to utilize information in this output. This would have otherwise required me to possibly copy and paste, pull together all this information manually and cite all these sources. So let's take a look at how did we get all this set up. So this is walking through an example where let's assume you don't have QuickSight, you don't have Q Business, and you're new to all of this. It's a very easy process to get started. With a few simple information about, hey, where do we want this region to be? Where do we want QuickSight deployed? What region? Provide a unique account name. You're able to get QuickSight up and running in a few short minutes. You can directly from here access and connect to Q Business if you so choose to do so. In this particular example, I'm going to walk through another use case, another way to go through that. You can see at this point, QuickSight is getting deployed. Again, cloud first. And as an admin, I have access to being able to administer and manage QuickSight. The nice part is, because of this tight integration, all the users that I've configured in QuickSight are automatically migrated over to Q for Business. Q for Business permissions on the data and the documents are honored and respected, and similarly on the QuickSight side. Directly from here, I'm able to create a Q Business application. And within the Q Business application, I'm able to select the retriever, the index, so that way we all have that application up and running. As Jean-Pierre talked about, there are over 40 plus connections natively available within Q Business. So as an admin now, I'm able to make those connections for my users to then leverage. So you can see here, there's a wide variety of different sources that Q Business offers that you're able to then start establishing those connections and making those relationships. So it's easy as that to get started. All right, so with this, let's kind of hear from our customers, and if you wouldn't mind, Noah, if you could maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what Kepler is and what do you guys do?
Yeah, of course. Noah Kershaw, I'm the head of product of Kepler, and Kepler is a global full-service digital marketing agency. So we work with many different clients, particularly many different industries and Fortune 500 brands, to create strategies to run their marketing campaigns, execute them, and then figure out how to connect with the right audience and get good insights from those campaigns.
Thank you. And Ravi?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ravi Reddy, data and analytics lead at Amazon Groceries, and my role is essentially to support data and analytics needs for all the grocery operations needs and also the functional areas and the underlying data engineering as well.
Very cool. So maybe if you guys wouldn't mind, just briefly talk about what sort of challenges are you experiencing in your kind of respective roles in your organizations? When it kind of comes to that initial pain point that I talked about, you have the worlds of structured and unstructured, and they really don't meet. So how's that kind of translating? Maybe if we could start with you, Noah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we work with many different brands, and so you can think of us kind of like a consultancy or agency that has dedicated teams to each individual client, and it takes a huge amount of work to synthesize all the different data sources we have to figure out what is driving certain kinds of performance or efficiencies with a marketing campaign. You have these brands that are global and they're running on pretty much every channel, and so they're across social and display and search and other sources. And they're also producing a huge amount of content as well. So we are producing strategy documents, we're getting data from how the campaigns are working. Client has information on who their core audiences are, what messaging and strategies might be working and not working. And we have to go through all of that to figure out what is the little kernel of the interesting insight that might be driving a specific behavior in the marketplace to get someone to engage with the marketing campaign or not engage with the marketing campaign. And the challenge is you've got all of this data, you've got people sifting through it, and you can do it, but by the time it's done, you've run out of time to do other things. So there's really not that much time to get really high quality insights in volume, and we're able to produce quality, but it's really, really short before we have to move on to the next activity.
Ravi?
Yeah, so I think for a scale of Amazon, we have multitude of data sets, ranging from transportation to your logistics to labor planning to how the price and promotions are done to ordering and things like that. With this plethora of data sets and continuous evolution of all of these and data models, I think the biggest challenge is about discovering what is the right data set for you to analyze for your analysis and to build a story around it. I think if you look at the overall analysis life cycle, we probably spend literally 20% on the actual analysis and probably spend about 80% of the time really discovering the data sets, transforming this data, cleansing it, preparing it. And I think having a tool like this would definitely eliminate half of the cleansing and preparation in a job, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you both had a distinct advantage of being able to try out this feature and preview ahead of the general availability and the launch. Maybe could you talk about some of the use cases that you were able to kind of try out, and kind of what benefits were you seeing, and kind of the experience for the users?
Yeah.
Start with you, yeah.
So we get many different kinds of content that we generate. So unstructured documents, PDFs, PowerPoints, Word docs. Literally, if there's a file format, we probably have it, and it's either from our team or from the client. And if you think about the way we work with clients, we also have many different isolated data sources per client, and they're not standardized because we need to work with our clients to meet them where they are. And so the challenge is, how do we take that data and make a lot of use of it? And by enabling it and pushing it into QuickSight, we have our teams that are doing a huge amount of effort to what Ravi talked about of cleaning data and making it available. And they're the data analysts. They're very good at going in and figuring out the right question to ask of the data and get an answer. But you also have an isolated team of client leaders, and they're working effectively as consultants to translate the client's goals into marketing strategy. And so QuickSight is the place where we can actually do that in one location. We can take all the unstructured documents. We don't have to change where it's located. It's all in Google Drive. We just connect it right into Q Business. And then the data analytics team that's working in QuickSight, they can benefit from that because it's pulling right in. And when they ask a question about maybe a new marketing strategy, it was a brand relaunch for a fashion brand, and trying to figure out why certain creative is working really well, maybe on TikTok and not as well on Facebook and Instagram, they get all of the context on, well, what are the audiences that are working really well, and what was the core theme that we were communicating to those audiences that wouldn't be available in the structured data. But they don't have to do the work to actually connect that. So there's a huge benefit in letting the people that are really good do what they do and then share information across the bridge.
And a follow-up question to that, does that kind of like translate into kind of some business benefit? Like, are you seeing the opportunity to kind of like save time or any other kind of intrinsic benefits as a result?
Pretty much as soon as we turn it on. So we see about 1/10 of the time we can get a high quality answer that it would take to either go into QuickSight and manually gather, or go into the raw data sources, which we use Athena to structure all of our data, and manually query that data. And then that becomes even more profound as you consider it's very, very quick to have Q Business just surface that answer automatically from unstructured data. And what it doesn't even technically cover is you may not even have had the time to actually go and find that unstructured insight in the first place. So there's time savings up front, so we said about 10x in terms of question to answer. But then there's just that incremental value add of things that you probably wouldn't have discovered just because you didn't have the bandwidth to.
Very cool. Ravi, what about use cases there?
I think I would see a future where insight generation becomes more conversational. I think at this stage, if you look at it, each vertical within the business is tunnel visioned into their area. I think it's, while they do try and connect all in the multifacets of the business to see and plan their activities, but it is still hard. For example, if I'm part of a labor function, I would need to look at the overall demand in the market, any new promotions that could be driving traffic. These are all different teams driving it. I might not have on all the information. I might not be able to really find out data sources that can help me plan it. So I think having a feature like Q, I would see a future where we're able to get holistic insight really. While Noah mentioned about the time saving, but I think in addition to time saving, I would also see two other benefits. It's one is customer experience. They don't have to wait for another analyst to pick the data for you to do the analysis, which saves time. And I think the other thing is the opportunity cost. For example, your ability to generate your insight that you can act today, if you're deferring it by a week, you're technically losing an opportunity for a week.
True.
So I think that's how I would see it, and it's getting really, really conversational.
If I could actually play off of something that Ravi said. So think of this data analytics team that has hypotheses on why something might be working or might not be working, or certain kind of performance is playing out differently than they anticipated in the marketplace. They have to do the work to figure out the right question, to go in and actually craft that analysis, and then analyze the results. And it doesn't always pan out to anything. They may go spend 5 minutes, they may spend 2 hours on an analysis, and their hypothesis is invalid. And that's okay, but that's time that effectively could have been used for something else. So by removing essentially the risk of coming up with hypotheses and testing them quickly, you can go and you can test many different ideas and start to really figure out, maybe you might have previously found just a surface level insight, but if you can ask 10 or 20 or 30 times the amount of questions in the same span of time, you could start to figure out maybe there's a deeper nugget that I just didn't have time to get to in the first place. And that I think is really cool because it kind of removes the stress of analysis.
Very cool. So as we kind of nearing the end of the year, looking ahead to 2025, would you be able to kind of share, like, where do you kind of see this particular feature and opportunities to kind of utilize that in your kind of organizations respectively? So maybe Ravi, if you want to start,
Yeah, so we are actively looking at areas where we can minimize this time, like I mentioned, 80% of the time on sourcing the data, cleansing the data, and preparing the data. We're trying to reduce it, so we're actively investing our time and effort to simplify the overall insight generation process. So my teams support a lot of business functional areas. We intend to have those business areas at least get to a stage of 40-50% comfortable with getting to a conversational BI sort of journey.
Very cool. And Noah, what about you?
Yeah, and on our team, we're actively working to deploy Q and QuickSight Q across our organization. So every team should have the same set of tools so that as you work with different clients, it's the identical experience, and you don't have to worry about the structure of the data or where the data is located. It's already been made available to Q. So that's the near-term plan. And then beyond that, if you think of the relationship between an agency and clients, a client, maybe a CMO or a CTO, has a question about some strategy or performance, they need to go through our team or go to a dashboard. Well, we can just remove the step and make it natural language in, the question they want, and natural language out, the source from Q. The short term is our team, the long term is absolutely just giving the keys to the people that have the questions in the first place.
If I may, are there any kind of key nuggets or takeaways you would like to kind of share with the audience, respectively, based on your hands-on experience with the product and the features and kind of key takeaways? Yeah.
I think based on what I'm seeing, I would see a significant reduction in time to get to insight. I think about 30-40% of the time would be definitely saved on the overall data preparation in stage itself. And I think the second part is your speed to insight, and third part is seamless experience for your users. You don't have to be a bottleneck for them to get to insight, really, right? So
sure, that always helps. Noah, what about you?
Yeah, 3 things on my end. So the first is just ease of deployment. So it was very, very fast to get this stood up. It was easy to find ways to expose the right data to Q Business. And in QuickSight, all of our data is structured in Athena, or all of our structured data is in Athena. So it took, frankly, I think 1 to 2 hours to go connect that data, make sure that we had the right keywords associated so that people could ask natural language questions with each field, and then they could just go and they could run with it, which is very important because we don't want to bog down our development team having to do a lot of manual setup for our different client teams. So that was the first one. The second one is security. As I'm talking about this, I'm realizing that my legal team somewhere is wondering why they feel a little off, and it's because we have very, very close relationships with our clients, and we have to be very careful in how we respect their data. And so we can keep the same security standards and governance that we apply to their data within S3 and within Athena and within our different stored unstructured file locations like Google Drive, without sacrificing the ability to access that. So the fact that we didn't have to rethink how we store and manage and separate data by client was very, very valuable. And then the third is just that we have these teams that they need to work together, but they also just need to work really fast. It's really high risk in marketing because things move so quickly. And so allowing each team to essentially operate comfortably in their silo, but together, and not have to worry about translating back and forth between teams was really valuable. So it was that security, that ease of getting stood up, and then the ability to essentially eliminate these silo concerns that exist within our org.
I appreciate you both taking the time to kind of share your stories. It's very helpful and insightful. So now, at this point, I'll kind of turn it over to Jean-Pierre to talk about the other side of the world. So we've talked about the QuickSight integration into Q Business, but let's talk about and let's see what the Q Business side of the world looks like. So, Jean-Pierre,
Thanks,
thank you.
Okay. So we're going to look at a demo, and just a quick recap that Q Business is really this general conversational chat experience for your unstructured data. And with this integration, what this means is that because it's a native integration, it's built into the product. It's built into Q Business in the console. You can enable the feature. It's a very easy configuration. I'll walk you through some screens for that. So it's really built in there. And what it does is that the standard Q Business experience is that you have a conversational experience where you have a question, you get an answer, you have a question, you have an answer with sources, etc. But here, the experience is enriched by introducing these deep insights from QuickSight whenever is relevant. Not all questions will have answers from QuickSight, but Q Business will figure that out and will talk to QuickSight to figure out when to actually introduce these insights when appropriate. So the experience is enriched in that way by introducing these insights from QuickSight that are linked to your databases and data warehouses. It's a really easy setup. QuickSight has more than 20 connectors to these popular data source to popular structured data sources. And this feature is included for all Q Business Pro subscriptions, right? And again, this is a preview, a feature that is in preview right now for Q Business. And we will launch this in GA down the road, shortly after. But let's get into it. So from an end user perspective, on the left-hand side, we can see a screenshot of a conversation ongoing that starts with an end user asking, what are the top customers by total usage sessions, right? This sounds like a pretty analytical type question where you want to slice and dice, understand some transactional information. But I may have documents in here that actually talk about this. It could be a weekly business review document, right? So I have an answer at the top that is getting an answer from a document and in a narrative form. And I can see there are some citations in the narrative, and I have a sources button that will tell me where the source of this answer came from. And underneath that, we will now have this rich experience that's coming from QuickSight to complement that answer that's coming from the unstructured data. So you have both unstructured answer, structured answers together here to make a complete picture for your question. And if you need to dive deeper into the answer that's brought back from QuickSight, we offer a button there that allows you to go straight into QuickSight, into that same query that you were typing, and just slice and dice, do some deeper analytical type work there to perhaps add some filters, etc., and then go back to your conversation to continue it there. So let's dive into this. Let's look at a demo. And in this demo, just setting the context a little bit here, just imagine an AWS customer who's trying to understand their usage and cost of their AWS services that they have in the enterprise. And so they're going to have questions about, okay, well, what are my services that I pay the most about? Or maybe they don't know what all these services do. So they want to understand both the transactional aspect or usage and cost, but also questions about the products themselves. So you can imagine some of these answers coming from the unstructured content that may be documentation about the services, but then some of the questions coming from more the transactional or usage that are more stored into these structured sources. And some of those questions could come from both. So let's look at the sequence of questions that this customer goes through to understand their usage. So the first question they may start up with is, what are my top spending services? This question is actually going to be answered by QuickSight here, because it's more about the actual usage, looking at the structured data. It comes back with a rich graphic here, a visualization that allows me to hover over, understand the values for each one of these bars here. And it tells me also that I use S3, but I don't know what S3 is. So I can actually follow up with a question that is, what is S3, right? And so this question now is tapping into the documentation, and I can see how now I get an answer from the documentation. I can see that the sources are pointing at web pages, right? So I have a narrative explaining to me what S3 is, and great, that answers my question. My next question is, show me a more amortized cost by service. Again, this is more about the structured content. And again, here, QuickSight actually renders a much richer, and even richer experience here where they have multiple visualizations with metrics and a summary of what is being presented to me. So depending on the question, you may have different kinds of answers, but it's a very rich experience. And you can even interact with these visuals inline. You can actually choose a different kind of visual for the same data, right? Or if you want to dive deeper into this particular answer, you can click on Explore Insights, and it takes you directly into QuickSight, where you can continue to interact, dive deeper, slice and dice, change filters, do a deeper analysis from a business intelligence perspective to understand that data, right? And again, I can interact with this data. I can also save some of these charts by clicking on, save in my pinboard, which is kind of like a bookmarks area, where I can have my, the ones that I wanted to keep, and I can recall those saved charts to go back to them and continue my analysis. When I'm done with deep diving in QuickSight, I can go back to my Q Business application, and okay, great. Let me actually now compare two services. Let's compare Glue and S3. And here, I'm actually going to get an answer from the documentation that tells me the difference between S3 and Glue from a service perspective with the sources of documents here. And I'm also going to get the comparison between Glue and S3 from an operational perspective, like the usage data, right? So it complementing the descriptive part above. So I can see here again another very rich visualization coming from QuickSight that gives me the breakdown for S3 and Glue. And then above that, I see the narrative that's coming back from the unstructured data. So you can see how the unstructured answer is complemented by the structured answer to really unify, the responses from the system. So from a setup perspective, it's very simple. Because it's deeply integrated with Q Business, just like it was with QuickSight, on the Q Business side, this is the console in Q Business. The admins will have a new feature called Amazon QuickSight on the left there. And when they click on that, there's a 3-step process to basically get this feature enabled and get those answers starting to pop up in your Q Business applications. So if you're not a QuickSight user today, we will walk you very easily through the creation of that account, just like Rahul showed earlier, but actually in a simplified way also. You'll create a QuickSight account. You'll actually connect your database, whether that data is in Redshift or MySQL or any other database. You'll connect to that, select the tables that you want, and then you'll share that data that you just connected to into your Q Business application with your end users. So it's a very simple step, a 3-step process. And here we can see the connectors that QuickSight offers so that you can quickly connect to any of these systems to pull answers from this structured content. So when you go through that step 2 that we saw earlier, this is where you pick a database or a data lake. You provide your credentials, and it'll connect. It'll show you the tables. You select the things, and then you share it with your end users. All right, so that kind of wraps up the presentation, and some of the key takeaways here is that this integration really unifies the insights across structured and unstructured data. Right? We saw it coming from QuickSight in the form of Q&A, the Q&A experience, introducing and incorporating answers from unstructured content, but also from the data stories feature that does the same thing. It allows you to even select documents and introduce unstructured input into those stories that you're creating. And then if you're coming in from the Q business side, then we are seeing how, in a conversation, we can now start seeing these single visualizations or multiple visualizations that are rich interactions with the end user whenever is appropriate, whenever an appropriate or relevant answer is available from QuickSight. And we also provide a deep link into QuickSight if the end user wants to go in there and analyze further the content. There's always that back and forth that they can go and dive deep into those visuals. So these experiences are embeddable in your applications or frameworks. We also offer APIs if you need additional control. And the features are available to all Q Pro users. All right. So for additional resources, we have Amazon Q Business, general documentation, but we also have a blog post we invite you to read. Similarly, we have for QuickSight, we have also published a new blog post where you can also check out the general documentation for the product, but we also published this week blog posts showing you how this feature works and how you can implement it on your end and try it out. We also invite you to check out the QuickSight community where you can learn a ton. There's tons of demos, videos, but you can also ask questions to experts that can actually help you address. And we actually have a bunch of people that are very motivated to help others in that community. So we're very active, so we encourage you to actually check that out. And yeah, we have another session later today that we invite you to go to where we explore different scenarios in QuickSight and use cases and how to use QuickSight to address those scenarios. So very interesting session later today. And that's it. With that, thank you very much for coming in today and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.